Entrepreneurial Development Services Limited, and Chair of Community Education Academy of Leadership. He supports economic and social policy initiatives in Africa, the Caribbean, the Middle East, and South Asia. Now, I kindly request Dr. Christopher to lead the session and share screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and good day to everyone. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for attending this webinar session. And today we are looking at a very important topic, using artificial intelligence responsibly and how it can benefit your work, both as an individual and as an organization. It is important to understand that artificial intelligence tools are not there to replace the human initiative, but they are there to provide you with help and support to improve and enhance your work. In other words, to make it more qualitative, make it more valuable, and add a touch of class to it. So it should not be seen as a replacement of the human thinking. Today, we are going to look at a number of areas. We are going to look at how AI can contribute towards personal and professional development. We will look at how people's attitudes and behaviors shape their use of AI. We would also look at guidelines that are offered by both publishers and institutions regarding how AI should be used. We'll be looking at the distinction or the difference between human interaction and AI interaction in terms of authorship, that is publishing and writing. We'll be looking at case studies of how AI is used in a good way and in a bad way. Then we'll be looking at the best practices of AI. And finally, we'll be looking at the trends for the future of AI and what it means to us. And so, how could we better understand how AI contributes to our lives? We talk about content. Every time you talk to an IT person, whether it's an IT analyst or whether it's an IT computer programmer or even maintenance engineer, he or she talks about content. But content is generated from ideas. It is generated from people's mindset. It is generated from people's experiences and skills. So content is not derived from some sort of whim or fancy or magic. It has to come from a human mind. And so any content that is generated, whether it is through imagery, whether it is through codes or algorithms, sometimes as we describe them as, those of us who did algebra and geometry will know what I'm referring to, and any form of data that is analyzed or pulled together and appear on the internet or the websites are those produced by human beings. And what the technology does is to provide us access to that content, whether that content is information, whether it is data, whether it is infographics or graphics. You know, it could be charts, bar charts, it could be other aspects of infographics, whatever they are, they represent content. And so on this slide here, it is suggesting that we need to understand how to apply AI to the various contents that we have. When we type, for example, on our WhatsApp or our phones, our mobile phones, we type text messages. All of these text messages can be analyzed for a number of things. So, for example, if you're conceptualizing a proposal for a project, for young people, for women, for elders, you create content. And it is that content that is used to develop a proposal or a summary of a proposal or a report. And so we use AI to understand how to structure that proposal, how to provide the technical information and knowledge. We don't use AI to get the information. We have to get the information ourselves. So whether we are texting, whether we are creating data, the important thing here is to understand that AI is just there to facilitate access and not really to displace the human initiative. It is not there to take over. It is not there to provide immediate gratification. It is there to enable and to help us to improve the quality of reporting and authorship that we do from time to time. I spoke earlier about the attitudes and behaviors in the way we use artificial intelligence. I think 2 or 3 webinars ago, I spoke about AI not being a new concept. It is not an invention. In the 21st century, it has been around since the 1950s. In fact, it was discovered 7 years before I was born, so to speak. And it is quite remarkable that combining science and engineering has produced a remarkable feat of excellence called artificial intelligence coming from the human person, not just man, but also women and children are even coming up with their own forms of artificial intelligence. But if we are to use these tools that are man-made or human-made, we need to understand how to behave. We need to understand the attitudes, our attitudes towards it. And therefore, we need to be open with the use of it. We need to be accountable. In other words, we need to take responsibility. We also need to understand how to seek support, technical support from the system and its operatives. And we also need to understand that the intelligence tools that are there are okay. It's the content that we have to question. Is that information important and relevant? It might be important, but it might not relate to what the project we are putting together. And what about people's data? How do we use it? How do we maximize people's data to suit a particular project? So, for example, a group of young people who are unemployed for, let's say, 18 months to 2 years, how do we use AI to include that information in our funding proposal? Well, we may have to look at labor market information from the government. We may have to speak to businesses that employ people to find out where the vacancies are. We might have to talk to the job centers or the labor bureau. But what we do is we get that information, that raw data first, before we use AI, because AI is there to structure, it is there to help and facilitate. It's not there to replace our ability to think. So our attitudes and behaviors towards the use of AI in work is important. If we are writing letters, we have to make sure that the letters are written to the right individuals, the right addresses, the names of the individuals are spelled properly. You use capital letters where possible, because many people who use technology tend to miss grammar, grammatical sentences and structuring, all of those things they tend to leave out. And in fact, if you use AI a lot, you'd find that a lot of the sentences have no full stops. And there again lies the flaws in the use of AI. So we have to check and recheck everything that we do. In terms of recruitment, selection, and placement of staff and volunteers, again, don't use AI for that purpose, because you have to recruit people. You need to know where they are. You need to know the advertising channels. You need to know where to place the advertisements. You also need to come up with what is called a checklist of the kind of individuals you're looking for. Yes, AI tools would probably give you an idea, but they will not give you the solution or solutions. The solutions lie within your organization. So again, your attitude towards AI in terms of recruitment and selection, which is an administrative matter, has to do with individuals and not necessarily AI. AI should always be the last resort. And more importantly, if you're managing people's records, so for example, you have trainees on a course, let's say on health and social care, the data that you have should be confidential. It should be held in a place both electronically, that is passworded, encrypted. It should also be placed in a physical cabinet with a key as well. You cannot expect AI to do that for you. So preserving people's data, preserving stakeholders' data as well, preserving government data that is given to you for your reports and your projects is also important. And as I said, all AI would do is to provide you with some sort of idea as to how you structure it. You structure your proposal and other things, but you, as an individual NGO, must do the rest. As someone who has been publishing for the last 40 years, I'm very much aware of the attribution of sources, how you cite sources, how you include sources of information in your reports. Whenever you're writing evaluation reports in the project reports, you're expected to write reports that are authentic, original, not copy and paste or cut and paste, because that's intellectual thievery, it's intellectual piracy or pilfering. It's like singing someone else's song, stealing someone else's lyrics and pretending it's your lyrics or your song. That itself is unethical. So if you are producing a report and a proposal and you have information on a particular document or study that has been done or a newspaper article or a textbook publication, always make sure that you cite the evidence. In other words, you include the evidence in your work. And that is what this slide is suggesting, that whatever you do, even if you use AI, always make sure that you corroborate the information, you have it verified. In other words, you test it or assess it for accuracy. Make sure that you have the right information and make sure that you have a data that is accurate, because some data are dated. So for example, if you're writing about young people and women and people who are materially impoverished, you look at data that is in existence now, not data that is there 2024, 2023, 2021, unless you're doing a piece of research where you have to do comparative studies. So always make sure that whatever information and data you have, you include it in your reports and your projects, and ensure that if you're using AI tools, those tools are used to maximize effectiveness in the way information and data are produced within your different reports and projects. And of course, there are different styles of citing your evidence. Those of you who have done research at a postgraduate level, you would know you have the Harvard style, you have the Oxford style, you have the Chicago style. In the case of people who are involved in doing bibliography, bibliography is looking at a number of publications cited by different authors and different writers, and there's a certain type of style that you need to present. If you're involved in electrical engineering or electronics, there's another way in which you have to cite acknowledgement of sources. If you're involved in psychology issues or social science issues, again, you have to find ways and means of citations. But these are things that you would not necessarily learn even at your university unless you're doing something around artificial intelligence. But these are standard practices that exist within the technology industry as we speak. So again, do your research, try to find out what tools are available and apply them in a way that is cost effective and beneficial to both yourself and your organization. If you are publishing reports, if you are publishing a proposal, that is, if you are submitting a proposal to a donor or a funder, there are certain guidelines that are expected of you. So, for example, when you are asked to tender for a piece of work, what happens? You're given a tender specification. If you have to apply for funding, you're given guidelines or guidance, all of which are important for you to read and understand. And it will tell you, for example, that if you're using AI, you must indicate where you use AI and why. And then, of course, if you're talking about facts and figures, you need to quote them. If you're doing a survey with young people or women or children, including children who are under 13, you need to source that information. So you can say the survey took place on the 9th of September, 2025, at a Gurdwara, in a mosque, a church, or a mandir, or a synagogue. If you're doing a piece of research with women who are looking for employment opportunities in the health and social care sector, again, you need to find out where these women are. You can use AI to get that information, but AI would not give you up-to-date information. You may need to look, you may need to Google and look for labor market information on unemployment figures among women of different age groups, ethnicity, etc., etc. So even though AI is there at our disposal, we still have to use our own human thinking. So again, we have to be honest. In other words, we have to be open, as the Russians would say, we have to exercise glasnost, which means openness. We have to be responsible and responsive to what we do. We have to be very careful to be fair-minded and not be biased or prejudiced, because information can be very prejudicial to different people, different cultures. So, for example, if we are talking about Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, and Sikhs, and Zoroastrians within the faith community, we need to be able to distinguish between those communities as they are in terms of their religious and faith affiliation. We cannot be biased and prejudiced, because once you're involved in project development, you have to be careful. We spoke about data privacy. It's important to be sensitive to others, because these are issues that we need to look at. And then, of course, we need to have quality control documents involved. Governance is very important in all of this. And so we need to make sure that our policies and programs are aligned with what we are doing. Again, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, there is a distinction between the use of AI and the human thought process. Could you guys hear me?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
Doctor.
okay, because the system was just behaving a bit funny here.
Yes, and your camera is not on, I think.
It's not on. This is strange. Let me, okay, just a minute. Something is not okay. Let me just see here. Just a minute. The system is very problematic today. Um,
All right, if it's not working, then it's fine. You can go ahead with this only.
Okay, yes.
Yes, visible. It's visible now.
Yes, as I said, the system is playing up today, and just forgive me. There are lots of outages here.
Mhm.
So this slide suggests that we need to focus on the human factor. That is how we think through issues as against using technology to help and support us. That is the notion of technology. It's not there to tell us what to do. It can provide us with suggestions for improvements. It can provide us with some guidance, but that's all it can do. We have to do the rest. And so if we look at these interesting data coming from the nonprofit quarterly publication of 2025, it tells us that only 62%, which is just under three-quarters of NGOs who are struggling to use AI to disclose where they're getting information from. So what people do, they cut and paste information from ChatGPT or Gemini or some other, or Google Scholar or Scientific Commons, and they cut and paste it in their reports, and they don't cite where the information comes from. And the rule of thumb is that if you access information from any one of those AI tools, what you do is to go into that particular reference that has been given to you, and you verify whether that evidence is true or not. Quite often when you click on that particular reference, it says the page doesn't exist. And that is because of the way the algorithms are actually regulated. So, but these are technical issues that you will not necessarily understand, because unless you're a technologist, you wouldn't appreciate that. So again, be very careful with that. 18% of NGOs sometimes fail to clearly attribute human authorship, as I mentioned in their reports. So for example, if you talk to a group of stakeholders, chambers of commerce, enterprise networks, voluntary sector organizations, health associations, if you talk to them, you need to source the information. You can say, had a meeting with the stakeholder group on the 5th of October, 2025, at the community center or the health center, and you state that as clear as possible, making sure that you have the correct spelling of the stakeholder's name, etc. Again, lack of disclosure can be a problem if you don't disclose donors by their names, where they come from, their operation procedures, the funding that they provide. All of these things are very important. And AI cannot help you with that, because more often than not, AI would give you what you ask for, what you request for. In terms of accountability, just over half of NGOs report difficulty. And my view is that I think more than 55% have difficulty in being responsible and responsive to AI. And in terms of accountability, this figure is probably more than that, because this research was done at the beginning of the year. Again, there is bias, and you can see that nearly 50% of all NGOs have problems with bias. Again, because people are generally prejudiced. Unless they understand the issues, they will continue to have a subjective view. Sometimes they're not prejudiced, but their views are discolored because they don't understand the issues at hand. And so it is important that you have systems in place to deal with bias, prejudice, discrimination, untoward behavior, because when you have an NGO to manage, you are dealing with people, real people. You're not dealing with humanoids and just machines. You're dealing with individuals, people who can think, people who can feel. And of course, data privacy. Uh, this is quite a high number. A number of NGOs are challenged on how to deal with data. And so the first question that you have to ask, do you have a quality control handbook? A quality control handbook is one that has all the quality assurance procedures, including data privacy. You have a data protection statement, a series of safeguards that are in place to protect people from harm. Because if their data is used, it can affect their monetary emoluments, it can affect their safety and security physically, and could also affect their well-being in general. So AI is not just some arbitrary tool to be used. It is one that should be used discretionately and responsibly. This next slide provides one of the things I was doing last night was I was looking at probably hundreds of case studies and how people use AI and then those who don't use AI responsibly. And rather than saying the do's and don'ts of AI, because the do's and don'ts of AI are neither here nor there. They are there to be used, but they're there to be used wisely and responsibly. And so there are some very interesting case studies that I came across. One was an NGO putting together a climate justice report or climate resilience report. And they were very responsible because what they did, they put together the report, pass it on to the stakeholders. In other words, make sure that the stakeholders were informed about that report. And then once they craft that report as a draft, version 1, as we describe it, they then uh, put it to machine learning. Machine learning means you command AI to tell you exactly what you need to do, or you tell AI what you would like to have in terms of the report, in terms of structure, columns, etc., and it will do the work for you. But again, you have to check for accuracy, both by information as well as data. So that is what they did. They used AI in a responsible way because they did their own fact checking and they made sure that the information was up to date. In relation to a humanitarian NGO, an NGO that was doing some work in Syria and Yemen and in Gaza, in Palestine, in the Palestinian area, they also use AI to analyze, migration, people moving from one part of the country to another, going into other countries and being accepted as refugees or migrants. But what they did, they withheld the names of the individuals and they only spoke about numbers and percentages. In other words, they used data rather than information to actually safeguard the individuals. And what they did, they used AI to help them to come up with a system of safeguarding rather than allowing the human being to use a system that would encourage people to do what they want. So you can use AI for lots of different things. One particular case study showed how irresponsible the NGO used AI. And the reason why the NGO didn't know about that is because that NGO was just 1 year or 2 years old. And many of the trustees within that NGO had no idea of how to use artificial intelligence. They thought you just cut and paste, and that was it. So what they did, they produced letters to different donors. They misspelled the names of some of the donors. They didn't have the correct addresses, postcodes, or zip code in the case of the United States and other parts of the world that use that term. And so they sent letters that were not necessarily appropriate. They were relevant to what they need, but not appropriate for what they were requesting. And that created a problem. It damaged their reputation, and they had to do what is called damage limitations by sending emails saying that they made a mistake. They didn't make a mistake. They misused AI tools for that purpose. And in terms of recruitment, one NGO used AI to create a recruitment platform for them to recruit staff and volunteers. And again, that was a mistake because you cannot create a recruitment platform if you haven't conducted what is called a job analysis within your organization. In other words, to determine how many people you need to be employed, etc. So those are some of the things that you need to bear in mind when you're using AI as a tool. This is a very interesting slide. It looks at some of the good things we should be doing when it comes to using AI. I spoke about being open, being responsible, being non-biased. In other words, be objective and fair rather than being subjective. Protect people's privacy. It's important. It is priceless. It's a high cost to pay when people's privacy is besmirched or affected, when someone's character is stained. And also make sure that you have systems in place. There are lots of systems that are on the internet, but of course they have to be appropriated to the aims and objectives of your organization. You cannot cut and paste a system and claim it's yours. It would not work. So always do your research when you're doing anything. Finally, this is a slide that I like most. I was talking about being subjective, and here am I being subjective, but this is true anyway. And these are the future trends in AI. And there are so many aspects to AI now, the impact it will have on professions, businesses, sectors, the sciences, civic and civil organizations. But these are some of the trends that a number of NGOs have actually predicted. And this is coming from the World Bank, 2024-2025 reports, which suggest that in the next 5 to 10 years, a number of NGOs will be involved in generative AI. So they will use AI to generate ideas. And in terms of the creative arts, nearly 50% will use AI for campaigns and telling stories, in other words, expressing their heritage. And again, these are just some of the interesting trends that are likely to take place. Again, it's all driven by the human factor, using, again, science and engineering to help and support human activity. I use artificial intelligence in the work that I do as a consultant, but I use it very, very sparingly. In other words, I don't use it for everything. I use it to structure things. I use it to provide technical specificity. I use it to help me to understand issues. I would ask it a question. I would ask a question, for example, if I'm dealing with something to do with psychotherapy or other issues of that nature. So again, NGO participants use the technology well and don't use it to discriminate other people and other organizations. Thank you very much for listening. Today we focused on a wide range of subject areas, from understanding AI contributions, case studies of responsible and irresponsible use of AI, to the future trends in artificial intelligence attribution. I wish to take this opportunity to thank you very much indeed for listening. And at this time, I'd like to avail myself to any question or questions you wish to ask. Thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Participants, please send me questions so that we can begin Q&A session. The first question is, how should we disclose AI use in reports without reducing credibility?
Yes, this question was asked, I think, a few times previously. Yes, most funders now are asking applicants or grantees or NGOs for that matter to disclose their use of AI. And what I usually advise is that said, I use AI to structure the bid. I didn't use AI to access content and data. I think once you say that, you're okay, you're covered. But if you say I use AI for this project or this proposal, you're opening yourself to danger because AI is widespread. It's not limited now just to project development. Governments use it, the military use it, the intelligence network uses it, doctors use it. I'm talking about medical practitioners, nurses, etc., scientists, engineers. Everyone is using it because it's a tool to enhance and improve the quality of work that you offer. So if you disclose it in your reports, you can say, well, yes, I use it for content, or I use it to verify or corroborate information and data. But just don't say, offhandedly that, okay, I use AI and leave it at that. Always explain where you use AI and why, I would say.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is, does declaring AI use in academic work risk my findings being questioned?
Again, I spoke about verification. So, for example, if you are doing a piece on, if you're doing a report, let's say, on employability in a village area, most villages, it's difficult to access formal data, formal information, because everyone is word of mouth. So you might decide to go on Google, for example, or one of the AI tools, and you type in there, I'd like to have information about Gujarat. I'd like to have information about Jerusalem. I'd like to have information on Los Angeles. I'd like to have information from Carriacou or some other part of the world. You need to make sure that that information is correct. So if that information is accurate, you could also say that I use AI to corroborate the citation of information sources. That's what you can say you use AI for. And that itself would give you brownie points. That would increase, your chances of winning that particular project. If you're doing an academic piece of research, you can also say that I use AI to verify and corroborate information. But if you just say again, I use AI and leave it like that, well, then you have a problem. So that is what I would suggest you guys do. Always state the reason or the rationale or the justification behind the use of AI rather than just saying I use it arbitrarily. I hope that satisfies the questioner.
Thank you, Doctor. The next question is, how should we cite AI tools used only for idea generation, not text creation?
This is a very balancing act, really. I would suggest that if the ideas come from the individual, well, then it should be stated that, we had a discussion. In fact, the idea should turn into a discussion, really. It's like this evening I'm having a meeting with one of the faith organizations to present an idea for crowdfunding. Now, the idea is coming from me, but it will become part and parcel of the report. So again, if you have an idea presented to a committee and it is minuted, in other words, it's documented, and then you use that report as the authoritative citation for your reporting. And if you want, you can then put it within AI and said, okay, could you access additional information for me to back up the existing information I have? And then you can use AI to suggest, okay, this is my idea. It went to a committee. This is the report. But I also got additional information through AI about how validational or how important this report is. And remember, I said again and again that AI is just there to facilitate and add value and support. It's not there to replace your ability to think. I hope that explanation is clear to you. The
Yes,
question,
doctor.
yeah.
Thanks for this. The next question is, what is the ethical side of using AI?
I would say good behavior. Again, have a very positive attitude to AI. People will tell you all kinds of things. Some people go on YouTube to get advice and guidance on AI. I said, no, don't do that because there are lots of charlatans out there. People within the technology industry also are struggling on how to use AI. I would say have a positive outlook. If you're working within a particular sector, if you're working in advocacy, if you're working in the environmental sciences, climate change, you're working in health and social care, sports, leisure, culture, all of those areas are peculiar to AI. So again, try and understand your aims and objectives or your mission as you have within your organization, and then use or appropriate AI tools to suit that. It's called machine learning. So you can teach the machine how to respond to the questions that you pose, but it has to come from you. So at the end of the day, as human beings, we are really AI when you come to think of it. Those are just tools at our disposal. So we have to be able to think. We can't allow the computer to think for us because then we are in big trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor, for your input. The next question is, how do you know that a given document was written with AI support if a human verifies all facts and spellings?
That's a very simplistic question, but I would say most times as a consultant, what I do if a client gives me feedback, I will look at it and I will determine whether AI was used or not. If it's a message from an email I sent, I would not check for AI symbols or citations because people tend to use it to make sure that they have the information that is correct. I think, however, and this is just my view, if you produced a report with facts and figures purporting or assuming that you used AI or you did use AI for that, that can be problematic because at the end of the day, if you ask to present an oral report, in other words, you have to speak the way I'm speaking, you have to rationalize, you have to justify, you have to sell that report, that is where you're going to be in trouble. So be very careful with what you've written because at some point you'll have to verbalize it. And that is where the problem lies. And I come across a lot of applicants who write beautiful reports. And when I ask them, could you summarize the report in your own words? They cannot because they haven't written it. Either AI has done it for them or someone else has. So again, be honest. Honesty is not just speaking the truth, but honesty is being open with even when you tell a lie or you speak half truth. So be honest with yourself, be open, because at some point, people will catch you out. So AI don't protect you. As I said, it helps you, but it could also hinder you. So at all times, be very open-minded. If you have facts and figures in a document, ask AI to give you a structure, okay? Nothing else, just a structure. And it will structure it in a way that is reflective of the facts and figures you present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, doctor. The next question is, What are some of the softwares one can use to determine whether or not AI was used to write a letter or proposal?
I don't know software from offhand. There's some softwares that are evolving at the moment. I would ask the guys to speak to a technologist about that. But the way you can detect people's use of AI is not just the language or the wording, but the tone. The tone. So for example, if I'm speaking to you in an instructional mode, in an advisory mode, in a relatable mode, in a defying mode, this is how I speak, this is how I write, and you come up with something else that is written by AI, you would know it's not my work. You would know it's somebody else who took it and decided to make it sound or look like me, but the tone itself is not me. Because I speak very deliberately, I write deliberately, I don't do things very quickly, I take my time. So again, the tone of a piece of work, whether it is a message or a text, can tell you something about the originator or the person who generated the idea. And again, it has a lot to do with psychology as well. The way you communicate your message can determine a lot about who you are and what you stand for. So, and that's why I'm saying to you guys, you have to be open-minded, you have to be honest. And my late father used to say, be consistent. Anything you do, be consistent with it all the way, and people will respect you for that. Even though you may make a mistake, it's human to err, but always be consistent with what you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is as a staff reliance on AI grows, how can NGO ensure responsible use while maintaining critical thinking? What mechanism can help guide and manage AI use within teams?
Yes, that's very important. I think the first thing we have to do is to meet with our staff on a regular basis to find out what are the challenges they're facing with either formulating information, obtaining information or data, and presenting it. Because it's easy to come up with an idea. Oh, I have an idea. I have a light bulb moment. I have a flash bulb moment. But it is difficult to structure that idea in a formal setting. And that is what NGOs grapple with. In fact, the average person struggles with that every day. Unless you are involved in the science like I am for the last 40 years, you would not be able to master or mistress that art. So again, if you have an idea, talk to experts, put it on AI and said, could you structure this idea for me? And then once it is structured, you then begin to get the data and then it begins to shape. And then once it begins to shape, you decide to, okay, I'll rewrite this proposal now because I don't want it to look as though AI helped me or supported me. That's another way you can do it. But these are some of the tricks of the trade, as we call it, when we're using AI. But as I said, use AI only when you have a challenge in terms of structure and tone. Don't use AI for every nook and cranny, everything, because you're going to have a problem.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is does being transparent about using AI in proposals or job application impact one's chances with funders or employers?
To some extent, yes. Recently, I sat on a panel to recruit a policy and research officer because one of the jobs that I do, I'm head of policy and research for different organizations. I do it either voluntary or I do it in a paid capacity. And one of the officers who would have been working with me, a very good graduate, and in fact, she's a lawyer, but her CV, when I looked at it, I realized that something was not right because she's only 30 something. And, she said she has years of experience in the legal profession. She's talking about 20 years. So if she's 20 years, it means that she started when she was a teenager. So I looked at it and I said to my colleagues that have a look at this CV. What do you think about it? And they said, well, this CV was doctored. I said, yes, but let's have an interview with the young lady anyway. So she came, and the first question we asked, could you tell us something about yourself, your years of experience in the legal profession? And she was struggling. She was struggling. So I think it is important to be honest, because if you're not honest, AI wouldn't be honest with you, to be honest. It will give you whatever you feed it with. So again, it is important to be honest with yourself, and that is where ethics are concerned, attitudes and behaviors towards the use of AI. And again, I would say that AI is a tool that should be used only when you need to use it to appropriate things, not to make things right for you. It has to come from within.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is, what is the safest way to anonymize sensitive data before using AI tools?
Yes, again, for example, people on this platform, it's over 100 of you, I saw. The last figure I saw was 111. Now, I don't know your names, I don't know where you come from, but I can use those numbers. And if I get the names of those people, I can use those numbers to percentagize to come up with an estimate percentage of how many people are interested in this particular webinar session. And based on your evaluation, again, it can tell me also, that statistic could tell me exactly how much you feel about AI and the impact on your life and your work. So that is an amenity, so to speak. So you use figures or statistic or data or datum to protect people and to safeguard them. It's like surveys. When we're doing surveys, we tell people only put your postcode or your zip code. You don't have to put your name. You could put your ethnicity. That's fine because that's good for equal opportunity policies. So there are different ways in which you can actually anonymize people without putting them in the firing line as such. And again, it's human thinking and human creativity. AI wouldn't help you with this, to be quite honest. It will give you a structure, but in terms of the idea, it has to come from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. The next question is, do different AI tools require different types of citations, or is there a universal method?
You notice that when I presented, I had several styles. I had styles for engineering and sciences. I had the Chicago style. We had the Harvard style, which is very popular with academics. And we also had styles for people who are involved in bibliographic production. Again, it depends on what kind of work you're doing. If you're doing a survey, it's a very simple style because it's more anecdotal, it's more informal. If you are doing a proposal, I would suggest you use the Harvard style or the Chicago style approach. If you're doing a piece of work on boreholing, this is where people drilling for wells and creating water wells and water distilleries and tanks and so on. Well, then you can use the engineering style of data collection. But at all times, try to make sure that you get the information correct, where it's coming from, who published it, when, what year. If it has web links, you also put it there. You would notice my presentations are very fairly referenced, and I check the references to see if they exist as well. So again, it's all about transparency, but you have to be rigorous as well and do your due diligence. rather than depending on AI. Because remember, AI really is a combination of web links that have been pulled together by human beings. Okay? It's technologists who pick up the information from all sources on the World Wide Web and place them in one place. That's all they do. It's as simple as that. And then you click there and you see all the sources of information. So be very diligent in the way you use AI. And I'm sure that it will also help you to be industrious in your projects and reports and proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your input. Dear participants, due to time limitations, we cannot cover all the questions posted here. As now we have reached the end of the webinar, I want to thank each one of you for your active participation. Participants, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form for today's session. Your input is crucial in helping us to improve. The feedback form will appear on your screen in a moment. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to contact us at support@fundsforngos.org. Once again, thank you, Dr. Christopher.
You're most welcome.
And to all the participants, we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much and goodbye.
Goodbye.